Good evening from Munich. It's around 9:30 in the evening local time in a pretty empty and quiet press center here at the Munich Security Conference, where the Kyiv Independent is covering what is a tumultuous meeting of ministers, leaders, arms industry people, experts, and of course media to discuss everything that is happening in the security sphere in the world right now. It's the 60th anniversary of this conference, and it might actually be the year in which security in the world is at its most fraught and most threatened as it has been since this whole conference started 60 years ago. And there's a reason why. On the Munich Security Report that they're publishing together with this conference, the title is Lose-Lose. It almost feels like everybody is losing, things are only getting worse, and it's this atmosphere of grimness and danger and uncertainty which is certainly dominating here. Coming from Ukraine, it's a surreal feeling right now as well with what's going on back at home in the news. We have reports of a very tricky situation around the city of Avdiivka in the Donetsk Oblast, areas potentially even surrounded or under threat of surrounding, high casualties, a really fierce Russian offensive, and the Ukrainian defenders just simply suffering from a lack of ammunition, exhaustion, and this is all in the bigger picture context of the threat of US funding, this great $60 billion package that needs to be passed, still blocked, still postponed by Congress, and this kind of anxiety of these two trajectories of the war, if that's passed or if it's not. So a lot to think about at the moment. We started the day with an interesting kind of quite tight round table with Ian Bremmer, the famous head of Eurasia Group, who's a veteran of this conference and a bit of a guru when it comes to all kinds of security and geopolitics and technology related developments, and he expressed things in an interesting way. He said that there were three wars going on at the moment, and they're all going badly. The Ukraine war, the war between Hamas and Israel, which seems to only be spreading to more countries in the Middle East, but also the war inside the United States, the war for its democracy, the war for its future between two very old people, Biden and Trump. Potential re-election of Trump is, it could be a serious threat for US democracy, but also for the world security order, especially after his recent comments at an emotional MAGA rally saying that, if a NATO country was attacked and they hadn't paid the fee, by which I think he meant the guideline of defense spending, that he would not only refuse to defend them, but he would encourage the aggressor, probably in this case Russia. Now it's a real wake-up call for European countries to realize that they have to not take their security for granted. They have to work on ending their dependence on the United States for their security. And that means two things. That means stepping up production and spending at home in their own countries, but it also means stepping up support for Ukraine, because people are starting to talk about this. If Ukraine were to fall, then Europe and maybe even NATO countries could be next. It should mean stepping up support for Ukraine, but unfortunately with some countries and some key weapon systems, that's still not the case. There's still something stopping them from doing everything they can, and we saw that today just outside the main hotel when I asked the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius about whether in this scenario that we're currently in, we could finally see the delivery of Taurus missiles, this crucial long-range system that Germany has to Ukraine. And he just said, nope, nothing has changed. The same arguments are still in place. Mr. Pistorius, what currently is the logic for not sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine?
There is new logic. Everybody knows the arguments.
But the big news, of course, which has now dominated discussion and dominated this conference when it broke, is, of course, the alleged death of Russian de facto opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who had been in prison already for over 3 years in Russia and had recently been sent to some very far away, remote, dire prison camp in the Russian Arctic. It is pretty huge news for good reason. We had obviously a very emotional Yulia Navalnaya here on stage speaking. Not sure if we can confirm this news or not. Of course, Ukrainians have very mixed feelings towards Alexei Navalny because on one hand he might be the biggest domestic opposition figure, going straight for the Putin regime often through protests. He's also made some very controversial statements which have shown a bit of this kind of imperialist attitude towards Ukraine back in 2014 and afterwards. I'm not going to make a judgment on himself. I'm certainly thinking less about him and more about the Ukrainian soldiers in Avdiivka right now, but it is a big moment, and you could see that it immediately hit the top of the agenda for all the speakers on panels and speaking to the media. Anyway, tomorrow is a big day. We've got an early start because we have some really big heavyweights coming in. We've got Zelensky, Scholz, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, Nancy Pelosi, NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg. So we need to get some sleep, but we'll be back tomorrow doing everything we can to cover it for you. Thank you for staying with us, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Good night.